Hangout is live. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're about to wander into the Badger Cave. This program brought to you by Honey Badger Radio. In the Badger Cave, we'll be interviewing noted authors amongst the Honey Badger crew. Some you may know from their blogs, numerous interviews, speaking events, and articles. Others who you may not be familiar with. On this program, we'll be discussing pivotal or new articles written by the Badgers in order to keep you up to date with their latest work. Today's show, The Naked Brainwasher, written by our own ever-charming Kristal Garcia. In this article, she writes about the oh-so-scandalous therapist, Sarah White, a self-reported former sex worker turned mental health professional, if you can believe that. Is she an exhibitionist looking for a private audience, or a therapist seeking an intimate session? How many Freudian slips are expected as we ooh-la-la-la-la our way into the mind of the naked therapist? Don't worry, this is a safe place. I'm your host, the Observing Libertarian, saying, prepare yourselves as we venture into the Badger Cave. Welcome to the show, Kristal.
Hi. So I don't know that I don't think she's an ex-sex worker. Did she say that?
I don't know whether or not she said that, but that seems to be the guiding.
No, she's not an ex-sex worker. She's actually very anti-sex worker. She doesn't want to be called a sex worker at all.
Well, too bad, because that's what she is.
That is what she is.
And joining us now is Hannah. We have Hannah Wallen joining us.
Hi, Hannah.
Hannah, are you there, sweetheart?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Okay, welcome to the show, Hannah.
Hello.
You missed my brilliant intro. I nailed it.
Sorry. For some reason, Google made me reinstall a program, or not a program, but a plugin that I already have.
Yeah, well, what can you do? Okay, so tonight on the show, as I said during the intro, we will be interviewing Kristal Garcia for her article, The Naked Therapist, or her article is entitled The Naked Brainwasher. Sarah White. Now, Kristal, you mentioned that she's not a former sex worker. That seems to be a perception that comes from people who have been paying attention to her or watching some of the documented information about her. In fact, when your original questionnaire came up, the person who originally wrote the question itself mentioned her being a former sex worker. So I don't know whether or not that's something that's on her site. I don't know if it used to be on her site.
I didn't see that on her site. I did not see that on her site, but like I said, when I saw it last time, she had moved things around, so I wouldn't be surprised that she had taken that off. I wouldn't put it past her. So
okay, one moment. The listeners did not get the benefit of our earlier conversation. Would you mind going over what you consider a PR scheme that happened to her site?
Right, okay, so I had gone to, when I first visited her site and was outraged, she had written very blatantly, it was written by her, and she had written about how men were the reason of that there's so much violence, and, men don't go to therapy, so they should be, there should be things done to, pretty much entice men to go to therapy, including using sexuality or etc., or however she worded things, but her wording was pretty spiky. I don't know how else to word that, but it was nasty. It was nasty, but it was like passive aggressive nasty towards men.
That is kind of what I've come to expect.
Right. So I was furious after looking at her site. I was like, oh my God, you've got to be freaking kidding me. And when I went back, it was about a week later when I was writing the article, her site was completely different. Someone must have helped her because the rewrite on that site was, I could see it because I've seen this type of female many times, so I'm used to seeing this type of crap, and I've seen people who hide their crap very well. So I was able to see it, but for someone who's not used to sifting through the freaking absolute nonsense, it would be difficult to see. She comes off as if she cares, when in fact she does not. But in before the rewrite, it was very blatant. Her misandry. It was passive aggressive, but it was there and it was very blatant. So, yeah.
Would you say it was kind of typical of what you've come to expect from feminists when talking about
Oh,
men?
absolutely. No, absolutely. It was blatantly so. Even passive aggressively, it was still intense. It was bad. Now, when I looked at the site again, and I haven't looked at it since I've written it, so God only knows what else is on there now. But she had even linked to, oh God, what was the link about? The link was now taken off, but I believe it's still on her site, linking to something about the amount of violence that men do, some crap like that. Okay. Pretty much in her eyes, men are the reason the world is violent. And it's up to her, topless Teresa, to frickin' guide the men to not be violent with her vagina shining everywhere. It's frickin'
Now, before we get too far into the broadcast, I want to let our viewers know, if you have specific questions for Kristal Garcia throughout the program, you can tweet those to me at C_libertarian. That is at SEE_libertarian. I will get them, and if we have time in the broadcast, I will bring up your questions to Miss Garcia herself, and that way you can interact with the Badger. Now, going to the talking points here, the actual article itself, which, by the way, Garcia, I wanted to let you know that there was a specific reason I wanted you to be our first author interviewed on the Badger Cave, and there was a specific reason I brought up the Naked Brainwasher. It's because you spoke with so much passion, and you have so much caring and consideration and compassion for men, especially having been a sex worker yourself, a professional one, that you wrote with so much inflamed indignance towards this woman.
Oh,
that
thank
is a
you.
really spooky sound that we're hearing this close to Halloween.
Yeah, there's, sorry, New York City, lots of sirens, even though the window's closed. It's pretty intense. Thank you, I appreciate that, Marshall.
Of course. Now, what we were talking about before we just started the broadcast here, we mentioned, between you and I, the heightened state of suggestiveness that a person is in when they are aroused. Arousal causes a heightened state of suggestion, and you mentioned that it can be extremely damaging if someone has either poor intent or poor skills when working with a therapy client while they're in a suggestive state. Would you like to go into detail about that?
Yes, I don't have problems with people using suggestive states or hypnotherapy, and I think it's important for people to be aware that when people do enter these states, because sometimes it can even happen without people actually trying to make it happen. So people can reach these different types of states where they're more receptive, more elevated, or just completely trusting and relaxing. But the thing is, what she's doing is she's using this state and she's manipulating it to create the type of man that she thinks men should be. She's manipulating these men's arousal and taking their vulnerability and using it to inject what she believes they should be. Now, what's really dangerous about someone who has this type of intention, who clearly is not healthy regarding men, who clearly does not have any listening or respect or honoring of men going on, she's not working with the men saying, okay, what do you want to create and what can I do to support what you need? She's operating from what she thinks men should be. She's operating out of her narcissistic view that she knows what's better for men than what men do, and she's also operating from men need to be fixed, which they do not. So I find it very disgusting what she's doing, because She knows that in the state of arousal, she will be able to say things to men, and men will take it on. Now, what's really bad about this is she could really hurt their sexuality. She only has male clients, for one, and she could really hurt their sexuality. Where, for instance, if I were to go to someone, to her, say I were to go to her, and I was in a state of arousal, and she could flat out say something. It didn't even have to be. It didn't even have to be like sneakily said. She could just blatantly say something to me, and in my own state of arousal, I would be less resistant to whatever's coming towards me. I would be less resistant to being able to say, okay, that's really not healthy, or this is healthy, or whatever, and I would take it on, and it could hurt me. So obviously her intentions are not good. Her intentions are men need fixing, and she's the Messiah who's going to fix men, because she's so fantastic and men have issues. So I find it what she's doing I find very repulsive, and she is an attractive woman, and she knows she's an attractive woman, and she's using that to bait men, and it's almost like a twisted harem she's got going on, that she wants to create. So it's very narcissistic. It's very misandric. It's disgusting all the way around.
Okay, we're going to open it up. Hannah, do you have any responses or thoughts to that particular part of the discussion?
I gotta agree with everything that Kristal said there. That's a particularly vulnerable state to be in, and it is a very impressionable time. I mean, you can break somebody pretty bad that way. No, you can't possibly have good intentions with this. No. This is just programming. It's like cult-like programming.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, since we're on this particular topic of cult-like programming, as Hannah just referenced it, and in accordance with everything that Kristal said, being that this woman has a degree and is working from the angle of feminist theory about what men should be as opposed to what they are, do you think that feminist theory, such as concepts of toxic masculinity and hegemonic masculinity, these being primary concerns inside feminist theory because they obsess over men, do you think it is potentially egregiously harmful to allow this woman to have access to men while they're in a suggestive state?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what she's doing is abusive. That she's being abusive, and because she's taking her clothes off and because she's attractive, it's being supported. And of course, you know, what Vice did an article on it. I can't with them, but praising what she does, of course, and it's nothing to be praised. Of course, let's gender flip it. You know, if a guy was like, you know, women really are the most violent creatures on the planet, and we need to fix them, and I'm going to do a helicopter in front of them until they get it right. You know, and I'm just going to, while I'm doing the helicopter, I'm going to inject them with ideas. Like, it's just, you know, it's ludicrous. It's I don't know. I have no words for this creature that she is, and it's like. Again, gender flipped, people would probably think something completely different. They would be like, huh, this is I don't know about this. But because it's an attractive female doing it, then everyone's like, yeah, it must be a good idea because she's getting naked and she's pretty. Screw it.
Hannah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I got to agree with all that too. I mean, where you brought up hegemonic masculinity and toxic masculinity, that's one of feminism's little cloak and mirrors tricks, where they, not so much the hegemonic end of it, but the toxic end of it, they'll infer characteristics upon men that are genderless characteristics, and they'll call it toxic masculinity. Oh, this is because of you know, what society tells them men are supposed to be, when in reality those characteristics, violence is not gendered at all. Women are not any less violent than men. Sometimes women use different methods including more proxy violence than men, especially if they're going against somebody bigger, stronger, and tougher than they are. But it's not a genderless behavior. Seeking out porn is not a genderless behavior. Getting into fights, getting into arguments, none of the stuff that they consider to be toxic masculinity is necessarily masculinity at all. It's simply behavior that's dysfunctional that they've decided to try to convince everybody happens because they're men.
We could spend 3 hours on the topic of projection, the way that feminists project behaviors that aren't gendered and try to say, oh, it's only men, women don't do that, and all
Right.
the lengths they've gone to in order to disown that behavior from being innately human and saying it's innately masculine. But that's not the topic of this particular broadcast. I'd love to do an article on that at some point, and I'd certainly invite the both of you. But getting back on topic, Kristal, before the show, you and I talked about, you mentioned here in your article about how she's wording and phrasing things in a very kind of bait-and-switch manner in order to keep from being either arrested or harassed by actual genuine authorities in the field, such as the Code of Ethics of the American Counseling Association and the American Psychology Association. Could you go into a few details or your thoughts on the way that she's skirting and manipulating the rules in order to get by without being literally exposed as being a sham?
Right. Well, you go on her site, and there was one full paragraph of leaping into many different avenues of trying to call herself a little bit of everything to try and find some excuse to do it so she shouldn't get arrested or fined, or be held, accountable for being a therapist who's being unethical, as many therapists feel she is, because, well, she is. She tried to use the term, it's tantric. No, taking your clothes off does not equal tantra. I study tantra. I teach, I've taught it. And no, it's not tantra. I have friends who work with tantra, and it's completely different. So, God, she's just throwing everything in there. And then she was saying, oh God, what other nonsense did she spew? Just a barrage of things. She tried to pull a little bit of everything. What did she say? Some sort of performance. What would she say? She said it was some kind of artistic performance, whatever the crap came out of her mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I think of this?
Kristal, you with us? Your mic cut out there for a moment. Okay, we seem to be experiencing technical difficulties, but you kind of expect that from Google Hangouts upon occasion. So while Kristal is trying to get back on the air, Hannah, did you want to add anything to that particular topic?
I don't know. It seems like the word that I would throw out, considering this woman has decided to put a whole lot of titles on herself, would be fraud. You can't claim to be doing a job that you're not doing because you want the thing that you are doing to be that job. And this is pretty much what she's done is decide that she wants to strip and call it therapy. And she's calling it therapy just to be able to make more money from it and be able to gather a set of clients around her and maybe feel like she can call it more acceptable than she would be able to call it if she just decided to strip without calling it therapy.
By the way, folks, Kristal is having problems with her laptop right now. She will be back just as soon as she can. So in the meanwhile, I'm going to ask Hannah some things about more general feminist activity instead of specifically the Naked Brainwasher, because it wasn't Hannah's article.
Anything specific?
Well, let me see here. This bait and switch tactic, the way that feminists will, attempt to purport themselves as being professionals that have men's best interests in mind. I see it all the time because I tend to look these things up. I tend to look out for. I see these very long-winded academic papers written on concepts like masculinity, as you said, the way that they project gendered, non-gendered issues and say that they're only men who do this. So I see a lot of it myself, and I know you do because you've been more involved in men's rights than I have, and you've actually studied what these people write. Let's go ahead and dive into that particular topic.
All right. Well, one area that the bait and switch that's very similar to this is the way they handle domestic abuse, where a woman who goes for help is able to get help. A woman, whether she's even being abused or not, she's able to get help. She can go to a shelter. She'll get an advocate for court cases. She'll get assistance sometimes paying her bills. She'll get assistance with even things like school, depending on the group that she gets involved with. A lot of times, if a man is abused and he calls for help, goes for any kind of assistance from the same types of organizations, there's a tendency where instead of treating him as an abuse victim and offering him shelter, offering him assistance escaping the circumstances that he's in, he's hooked up instead with a hotline for men who are afraid they are going to become abusers, or men who are abusers who are trying to keep themselves in check. And so here you might have this guy whose wife or girlfriend has assaulted him, and he's in danger, and he's injured, or simply needs to get away. And instead, he's treated like the perpetrator and told that he's the bad guy, and they shove him right into some type of therapy or some type of counseling to try to get him to stop doing that.
Even though he's not the one doing it.
Yeah. Even though he's not the one doing it. And it's the same thing. It takes a man in a vulnerable position, and during that time when he is unusually vulnerable or more vulnerable, tries to paint a different image of who he is over who he actually is.
If you're just tuning in, we were interviewing Kristal Garcia, and unfortunately her laptop decided to basically pull a full Macintosh moment. So now we are waiting for her to return, and I am sitting here talking with Anna Wallen, another of the Honey Badger crew.
Which I actually wasn't expecting to talk this much tonight.
Well, you never know what's going to happen in situations like this. You just kind of roll with the punches, that's all.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Kristal will be able to come back on soon, and if not, hopefully we'll be able to do this again and have Kristal on again.
Yeah, I was sitting here. We were going over all these different talking points, and she and I had a discussion for half an hour, and we thought that we'd be able to get tweet questions sent in, and there's going to be no problem filling a full hour, and how many things that we can talk about with this Naked Brainwasher. And Microsoft decides to say, no, I am convinced to this day, I said it years ago, and I am convinced to this day that Bill Gates somewhere, he has an office, and in this office he has a desk, and upon this desk he has a button that he presses throughout the day and goes into a giggle fit, and this button makes a random Windows computer completely shut down.
That's a lot like my theory of corporate management. Actually, it's not. I have this mock theory of corporate management that all corporations have a secret room full of chimpanzees on acid. They give them paper and crayons, and whatever they draw, that becomes policy. Of course, the U.S. government has a room like that, too. They call it Congress.
Yes, they do. I would imagine the room full of psychedelic monkeys has less shit throwing.
Possibly. But it's prettier. Or at least to them.
Oh, my God. Yes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the beauty of live television, or in this case, radio.
Live internet. Actually, back on that idea of men needing fixing, that feminists think men need fixed. that really seems to be a common theme for them. Everything, not just the whole patriarchy theory, but even underneath patriarchy theory seems to be this idea that everything that's wrong with the world, or everything they don't like about the world, is masculine, or is caused by the masculine, is caused by things that men want, or men do, or men receive. Anytime anything benefits a man, and you can see it. You can see it not just in their discussion about, when you ask for proof of patriarchy theory, they'll go, oh, well, there's more male CEOs and there's more men in positions of power, political power, and all that. And if you start to talk about the differences in seeking those positions and the differences in doing the things it takes to get those positions, all of a sudden you get to start talking about the nature of people, and the nature of what men have to do in order to provide for their families versus what women have to do or don't have to do, and the difference in what they are or are not willing to pursue, even if they don't have to. Who has more ambition towards conquering and achieving, and so on. And even though that ambition is the reason why we have modern medicine, because of that ambition. We have, modern infrastructure because of that ambition. We are able to talk to each other internationally on a computer, live on the internet, if we across the states, across the nations, because of that ambition. It's men tinkering with things, men wanting to build things, men wanting to create things, and men wanting to fix. I don't have something to help me do this, and make I don't have something to help me do this a problem of the past instead of a current thing. And yet feminists seem to hate that, despite the fact that they benefit from it. It just seems to be a fundamental thing. Rather than wanting to encourage women to step up and also do that, they're more interested in breaking men down and altering men to make them less ambitious and less creative and less less interested in building and growing and creating things.
This reminds me a great deal of one of the more recent posts on the Honey Badger homepage on Facebook. Someone had posted in a Scandinavian version of Survivor, and they accidentally created a gender study. They had no intentions of it. It was just supposed to be live TV. It was supposed to be, reality TV. And what happened was they took the men and they put them on one island. And then they took the women and they put them on another island. Equal number of men, equal number of women. And then they were just said, they were given a certain amount of supplies to help them, and they were expected to survive on these two separate islands. And what happened was the men immediately just started working, because they wanted shelter, they wanted to save as many of their provisions as possible, they wanted to be able to survive in this environment. So they had some disagreements here and there. They were quickly sorted out, and they just went to work. One guy was cooking every night. Other people were working on gathering wood that they could use to then burn for fire. They were gathering wood that they could use to make shelters for themselves, and they stuck it out. They even went through some not strong tropical storms, because I'm sure the network would never allow them to be exposed to, like a hurricane or something like that. But they had some tropical storms, and they were completely safe because they had shelter. They had built themselves shelter, complete with overhangs and decking, so that they didn't have to sleep on the ground. That way they didn't have to deal with sand fleas and mites and other things like that, just eating them alive. Meanwhile, over on the women's island, what happened was they sunbathed, and they made a clothesline to dry out their clothes, and they only ate the provisions they were given. And by the time that the food for the women was almost running out, this was several episodes in, which constituted several weeks.
Had they built themselves any kind of shelter?
No, they didn't do any of that. They complained. Well, they immediately started to try and organize things. The women did. They tried to organize according to consensus. And because if you gather 5 women together, average women who don't already know each other, there's not going to be any kind of consensus whatsoever. So they accomplished nothing.
Oh gosh.
It got so bad.
Sunbathed?
It got so bad that the network, instead of canceling the show because of how bad it was getting, they decided to help the women out. So what they did was they decided to take a certain member from each group and transplant them to the other one. So one of the women went to the men's island, and one of the men went to the women's island.
Uh-oh.
And the woman on the men's island, she starts doing things like grooming. You know, using a one of those little pocket knives that has the small set of scissors to like trim their beards and cut their hair, and she instantly becomes very domestic, like instantaneously, which I'm sure just burned more than a few feminist asses.
Yeah, probably.
Meanwhile, the man who went to the woman's island, it's him and 4 or 5 women, and he is just the most pitiable, miserable fucking dude you've ever seen. And I felt sorry for the guy. I'm borderline psychopathic. Do you know how bad something has to be for me to pity someone? That poor son of a bitch. Oh my God. And they treated him like dirt. And he's doing all these things, trying to build. And immediately when he gets on the island, they literally have the episode. You know, they transplant each of the people. You know, the woman is automatically accepted. But the man goes to the island and he's like, okay, you know, I'm here, blah, 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 blah. You know, they make the introductions and he's like, okay, where are you sleeping? You know, where's your shelter, basically? And they're like, oh, we don't have that. And he's sitting there going, what? What do you mean?
They didn't build anything.
They didn't build anything. I shit you not. They've got a side-by-side picture on the post that was... They built nothing. They created nothing. They had a clothesline by bending a tree over.
My goodness.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot imagine. That'd be like the first 2 things I would think of would be shelter and then food and water.
Exactly.
You know, I just cannot imagine. Of course, maybe they didn't play the same kind of stuff I did when I was a kid. Maybe they didn't watch the same kind of stuff I watched when I was a kid. I don't know.
Oh, wait a minute.
Hey,
I think
Kristal's
we have Garcia back. Kristal, are you there? We love you. Aha! I hear movement. She might be there. She might have been captured by a feminist. We don't know.
Oh.
She hid under the bed. Never hide under the bed. Haven't you seen Taken? Never hide under the bed.
Actually, I haven't seen Taken.
Oh my God! What is wrong with that? Is a great movie. You should do not come back on this show until you've seen that movie. Goddamn it. It was really good. No, really, it was.
I haven't seen a lot of the more recent movies. Just have not had time.
Kristal.
Are you back, Kristal?
I think we're going to get a shower scene with Kristal. This will be interesting.
I don't know. That sounded like static.
Could have been. She's still having technical difficulties. I apologize to all of our viewers. If you're just tuning in, we were interviewing Kristal Garcia, and then her laptop decided to take a giant dump on our program, and she was kicked off. So now Hannah and I have been sitting here BSing in the meanwhile. We promise we will get to interviewing Kristal at some point. And if not, then I will simply have to kidnap Bill Gates and make him fix her laptop.
There we go. And there she goes again. There she's gone again. I might lose my voice tonight. Fair warning. It's that couple of weeks when all the leaves in Ohio fall on the ground and start molding. And I'm allergic to leaves and mold and all that shit's in the air. And so I'm like miserable right now.
Have you tried some Benadryl pills?
Oh, God. I developed a tolerance for Benadryl when I was 12.
Oh, dear Lord. Oh, yeah, that's right. You had pretty severe asthma, as I recall.
Yeah. This is probably my worst leaf year in the last 4 or 5 years, though. I sound awful. Hey, at least you can't catch anything over the radio. But, well, we've got, let's see, Kristal left group, Kristal join group, Kristal left group, Kristal join group. She just keeps playing peekaboo.
Isn't it just like a woman to pop into my life and then go out inexplicably for no reason over and over and over again?
Kristal's crank calling us.
You know, speaking of the way that feminists especially tend to do a bait and switch, I saw this no better example I could think of than the Ray Rice incident.
Oh gosh, yeah. I didn't want to make any judgments on that until more information came out, and then when I saw the video on TMZ, which by the way, something interesting, they've reposted an edited version of that, and I saw the behavior prior to the elevator incident itself. I
Hey,
realized
I'm back.
oh, hey.
Success!
My computer has been shutting down, so that means that I'm going to have to add that to the list of new things to buy soon. Yay!
You said it was a laptop, right, Kristal?
Yeah, it's a laptop. I mean, it's survived a lot of abuse, so it's a really good laptop. It's just
Yeah,
has
do me a
not
favor
been
real
handled
quick.
with care.
Put your hand underneath and feel the underneath of the laptop and see if it's exceptionally warm.
It was. That's what I was starting to wonder if it was just overheating and that's why it shut off, because it was very hot.
Yeah, if you want to fix that particular problem, head to like any retailer that has electronics. You can usually find USB powered fans that you set it on the platform, and then it constantly blows cool air on the bottom of the laptop. It keeps it from getting hot. My mother consistently buys, as her laptop of choice, Toshiba satellite brand laptops.
That's what I got. I freaking love Toshiba.
Yeah.
Is it an overheater?
Yes.
Okay, I guess we could talk more about this after the show.
Yes, we
we
certainly
shall
can.
discuss that.
Listeners, if you're tuning in, her laptop is overheating. It's a Toshiba satellite. It's a good enough brand, but be aware they do tend to overheat because the fans that they put in these laptops are woefully underpowered for the amount of system specs, the amount of RAM, and the type of processors that are in them. So they have a consistent problem throughout the genesis of the satellite series from Toshiba of overheating. So if you have that problem, just a quick PSA, get yourself a USB-powered fan that actually blows cool air on the bottom of the laptop. It'll help it prevent it from overheating. Just as a public service announcement, that does tend to happen with a lot of Toshiba satellite laptops. They're good laptops. It's just that every company, no matter where you go to when you're shopping computers, they skimp or they try and cut corners somewhere. And it's only if you're aware of the fact that they're cutting corners that you can counteract that, and then you can have yourself a great working laptop. The Toshiba Satellite series, they give you good system specs at a very, very decent price, and they've got powerful processors and whatnot. It's just they have this one little problem. So don't think I'm bashing Toshiba. I don't want them sending me, hate mail or friggin' taking me to court. It's a good brand. It just has a particular issue. But anyway, we have Garcia back. Hooray!
What knowledge you learn at Honey Badger.
Yes, we are a consummate resource of information for your viewing pleasures. Okay, so back to the Naked Brainwasher. Now, before you left us, Garcia, how shameful of you. Horrible, horrible of you. You left us in the darkness and we were alone. You know I love you. You're awesome. Don't worry about it. Okay, back to the article at hand. Now that we can get back to the article at hand. Now, before you left, we were going to go into we were discussing the bait and switch we were discussing the the way in which she was trying to, Sarah White, which, by the way, a pretty white girl named White, that seems like a red flag already. That's just me. Just throwing that out there. Anyone named White or named Black, you know, if I meet a black man and he's named Black, I'm like, really? That's your last name? Really? I suppose
Is that your real name?
I mean, I guess it would be really strange if I met, you know, like a Latino named, you know, like Justin Magenta. I suppose that would be extra weird, but just colors as last names. That concept weirds me out for some reason. Anyway, getting back to this, the way in which she was skirting the rules to get around being exposed as a fraud. I think your last word was actually, you know, right before I started talking to Hannah about it, she mentioned that this woman was basically a fraud. Would you like to readdress that particular topic?
Well, yeah, because she's very adamant about not being called a sex worker. And she also has this whole thing against porn, which she elaborated more. Gosh, darn, hold on a second. This freaking sirens. The sirens! Which she elaborated more before she edited that she has this big thing about men addressing their issues, what she calls an issue with porn, and how it's objectifying or some crap, you know, the usual crap. She had written that more explicitly before. And I wish I would have taken a freaking screenshot of this because now it's just, you know, pretty much hearsay. But she had elaborated more on this. So she has an issue with porn and porno, except her own. There's no porn, it's all bad, you're all objectifiers. Unless you're objectifying me and paying me for it, then yes! I can't. It's ridiculous. I don't think, you know, I don't believe in objectification, but I'm just speaking from her mentality, you know. Anyway, so yes, she's adamantly saying that she's not a sex worker. She's trying to say she does tantra, which she does not. Taking your clothes off does not equal tantra. It's a lot more entailed than that, and takes studying and experience. And so she's using all she spent an entire paragraph throwing every which way she could pick at and saying one that she was a performance. It was some sort of performance. Artistic, some crap like that, and I was like, wow, you know, I wish I had thought of that slew of bullshit when I was a stripper worrying about getting fined because I didn't have one foot on the floor. I should have said, this is a performance art, and I am expressing myself, my tits in his face, and this is art, which it is. I mean, it is a performance art. There, you know. There's a lot of strippers who do put a lot of work into their performance art. However, this woman is using it as a way to, you know, she's using every title she possibly can to try and cover her ass. So that's the bottom line. It's pretty much begging, please don't arrest me or fine me, or, you know, put me up on charges for being an unethical therapist.
So she's calling it performance art therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, some crap like that. I'm like, oh my god! Like the load of crap was just so. I mean, I would have like up to my knees, just wafting through her bullshit of how she's trying to skirt around, and then she's very adamant. Oh, I'm not a sex worker. It's very arrogant. It comes off as very condescending. She doesn't like porn, and she has an issue with men watching porn. And sees it as an issue, you know, oh, men watching porn, and the porn stars, how do they feel? They love it! They love it, that's why they chose it. Good God. And then, you know, so again, it's the whole thing, sex work is not okay, except if it's my sex work and you're paying me for it.
I've seen that a lot. The hypocrisy just never ends. Anytime I'm dealing or listening to someone who has been educated in feminist theory, I tend to think, okay, here we go. I'm going to need my galoshes. Son of a bitch, where did I put them?
Right.
The bullshit just stacks so very quickly.
Yeah. Feeling.
Can you imagine if they applied that concept to other things? And like, I'm not a bartender. I am providing alcohol performance therapy. Yeah. Alcohol art therapy. This is not a bar. I'm going to put everybody on television, and it's a cooking show. I'm teaching how to make mixed drinks.
Oh my God.
I would like to point out that throughout human history, man's greatest therapist was his local bartender. And it is known. It has been
And his
known.
local whore, don't forget her.
Yep.
Oh, yes, of course.
But
Both
she's
listeners
not,
and
she's
analysts.
not a whore. Here's the difference. She's not, well, she is a whore, but she's just in denial about it. But she's not as upfront as a whore. You know, she doesn't listen as well as a whore. So you might as well go to a whore. Why are you going to her? At least she'll have
That brings up an important point. We spoke about this before the show started. I had watched her doing one of her sessions. It didn't allow it to get to the part of actual nudity, but it was a preview of one of her sessions. And here the client is sitting across from her, and he's very solemn, and he's trying to talk about his problems. Meanwhile, she is less than 4 feet away. She is real close to this guy, and she's sexualizing herself. She is literally doing a strip, and I gotta tell you, she's not bad at it. By the way, just to put that out there, she's not bad at stripping. By the way,
Yeah, go ahead.
but she is literally stripping, and she's not doing a strip tease, mind you, because she's got to get completely naked for this guy in person. She is a stripper. And the look on her face, he's trying to go to a therapist. He's trying to get therapy. He's sitting there talking about his problems, and she is completely and utterly oblivious to the fact that he has real problems. Or maybe that's part of her sexualization, is that men are explaining their problems to her in a serious way because they need help, and she is just standing there stripping and doing this performance. She is being an exhibitionist. She's enhancing her own psychology, her own
She's
pathology.
being a sexual abuser, as far as I see it. She's sexually abusing these men. That's the way I look at it.
Exactly. She's doing this to satisfy her own sense of exhibitionism.
Yep.
And she's doing it in a really, really scandalous way. And it seems like she's just using this therapy gig as her shtick to get away with being an exhibitionist and not feeling dirty about it herself. If she can convince herself that she is providing a service of therapy, she's doing it for the benefit of others, then she doesn't have to admit to herself that really she's an exhibitionist who gets off on people looking at her while she strips.
Right. Right, and the thing is, no matter whether she's good at it or not is neither here nor there, because what she's using it for is she's being harmful and abusive towards men. She's using sexuality to abuse men. To me, it's sexual abuse. Because she's using their own arousal to create what she thinks, to create the man she thinks he should be. Again, like you said, she's not listening to these guys. She's using them. She's using them in every sense of the word, and it's extremely damaging because Lord knows what she even says. Before her website was revamped, she even said, well, sometimes I say no, I don't take off my clothes. And it's like, okay, well, what the hell are you doing? You know, it's she's like, I just use that, you know, sometimes I say no so that I can learn, or they can learn, and what's authentic, whatever the fuck her wording was. And I'm just all of this reeks as really, really bad, really demented, really grotesque, really abusive. However, because she's an attractive female, she's all over the place. She's on guest shows. She's on, she's a guest on shows. She's, as if this is normal and okay, and it's not. But she's getting away with it because she's an attractive female.
So she's actually getting, she's making the rounds on television then with this.
Oh yeah, she's been. I forget what show had her on. I believe it's on her website.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, she was a guest on some show. Vice did a write-up on her saying how amazing she was. I didn't read it completely because Vice is so full of crap. I just can't with them anymore. But I'm not surprised they were praising her because that just sounds like them. So yeah, she's been guest show. You know, this is. I mean, the actual therapists are very disturbed with what she's doing. They don't agree with what she's doing. But the media loves it, of course, right?
Being the media's sweetheart, she could spawn imitators.
Right. Ugh.
Actually, speaking to that, Hannah, before the broadcast began, I was talking to Kristal about the satanic cult scare which went on in the 80s. Do you recall that, Hannah?
Vaguely, yeah. I was a kid in the 80s, but I remember when it started coming out that these stories were all false. It started coming out in the 90s, in the early 20th century. Pretty much all of the stories had been debunked by the 21st century, by the beginning of the 21st century, and it was appalling to learn the suffering of some of the actual victims, the falsely accused in that.
Indeed. Now, for those of you listeners who don't know the backdrop, I'm going to set the stage for you and then use that as an examination of what this woman is doing, because I do believe it is pertinent to the concept of what can happen, the dangers of what can happen when a highly suggestive state is used in therapy, and specifically when it is used incorrectly or when it is used to push an agenda. I want to highlight the dangers for you, and then I will open it up to the Badgers, Kristal first and then Hannah, for their input on that. Now, back in the 80s, they were experimenting. It was the early days of, it was still the experimental stage of hypnotherapy. It was before they worked out all the kinks, and some would say they still haven't worked out all the kinks. It's still very, very dangerous, but it is used, when it's used correctly, it can be very, very beneficial. However, when used incorrectly, it can be absolutely detrimental.
Right.
Back in the 80s, they had this big scare about satanic cults, satanic cults, satanic cults. These children were being sexualized, and they were taking part in satanic rituals where people were sacrificed. And they started coming up with more and more egregious claims. And the reason they came up with these claims is because these people, who were adults at the time, were placed under hypnotherapy in a very suggestive state of consciousness. This is the danger. This is the inherent danger of a suggestive state. And the researchers, psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists, because they collectively got on the bandwagon, they started asking questions. Did you experience this? Did you experience that? And when you're in a highly suggestive state, the mention of a possibility causes the subconscious mind to create false memories. And what happened was, as they were suggesting all of these possible scenarios, all of these possible events, these people who were being victimized by their own therapists created these memories. And they talked about people flying around the room like old stereotypes about witches covenants flying around on broomsticks. They talked about human sacrifice and sexual rituals. And keep in mind, these are false memories that were being imprinted on people that they now have to suffer with for the rest of their lives. So these people were egregiously abused by their own therapists because they didn't quite understand the inner workings and mechanics of a suggestive state. And so the FBI did a concerted effort where they investigated all these claims, and they found not one single shred of evidence for any of this. And the claims that were made were so egregious, like people flying, people literally just taking off the ground, people consummating with the devil himself in person. Now, in a very evangelical culture that we live in, these things would seem preposterous to me, seem completely plausible to other people if you're a mystical thinker to begin with. But this is the inherent danger of working from a hypnotic or a suggestive state. And here we have Sarah White intentionally creating an aroused state, which is basically a hypnotic state. The mind, the subconscious mind, actually enters a suggestive state. So anything that is said becomes taken as a post-hypnotic suggestion, in that, as Kristal stated, you are less capable of resisting the suggestion. So this is the inherent danger, and when working from a feminist theory standpoint about masculinity, or about how men should be as opposed to what their innate qualities are, not only could you convince someone of pretty much anything, you can convince someone that they're violent when they've never hurt someone. That is what we're talking about, that men are inherently violent, toxic masculinity, hegemonic masculinity, all these feminist concepts that don't hold true to reality. And it is extremely dangerous from my perspective. Now I'm going to open it up to the Badgers now. Kristal, your thoughts?
Yeah, it is extremely dangerous. What really got me was, because I'm not against using hypnotherapy, I've used it, and I'm not against being aware of these states. Like, as a Dom, I know that my submissive would enter that type of state. And for me, I called it like a soul connection. Like, we kind of created the soul connection, especially doing something rhythmic like flogging. We'd both enter like this trance-like state. And I'm very aware of how susceptible that state is, and would never take advantage of it. And it's not something that I really spoke that much about until now I started to talk about it. What really is a really big red flag to me is that she mentions this. That she mentions this on her website with this eagerness. That's the type of information that's really should not be readily available to just whoever. Like, oh, guess what? In this type of state, in the arousal state, you can implant these ideas. And the fact that she goes out of her way to say that, I found it really disturbing, because it's not something that should be spoken about so casually, and it's definitely shows how eager she is to have that knowledge, and that disturbs me. I don't think that someone who is like, oh, look what I can do when they're in this state of mind, that's a red flag. That's a really huge red flag. That's not something to brag about. So I was pretty disgusted by that.
Hannah, anything to?
Yeah, it seems to me that she's bragging about being able to take men and mold them and shape them to suit feminist ideology,
Yep.
which is pretty much your sexuality is invalid, your needs are invalid,
Yep.
your emotions are invalid, your wants are invalid. Subjugate everything about yourself to me.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. She could care less what those men's needs are. And that's what's important, is what do men need? I mean, that's the whole conversation that needs to come forward. That's the whole point that has been missed. What do men need? And listening. She has no desire to listen. She doesn't give a shit what men need. She's imposing what she thinks men should need and creating the men that she thinks how men should be. Like, creating the men she wants.
Now, before the broadcast, go ahead, Hannah. I'm sorry.
It's kind of funny it always seems like it ends up being women in therapy doing this, women therapists doing this. It's exactly the opposite of what we are taught to do with women. When a woman comes to you with an issue, the first thing you do is validate. And this is exactly the opposite of that.
Right.
Before the broadcast, I mentioned to Kristal here that this seems to be a subset behavior that is common amongst the greater macrocosm of the issues between genders, between men and women, that women tend to change or want to change men. You know, the Nightingale effect, that this man is damaged or he is crippled in some way, he is hurt or harmed, and that's the only thing wrong with him, and because I have the magic hoo-ha, I can go ahead and change him, and I can make him better. I can make him different, and he'll be a better individual, and then he'll be better off for it. I'm doing this for his own good. Meanwhile, it seems what they're really doing is just trying to change the man to what they would prefer. And keep in mind, we are now at our time limit. I'm sorry. We can continue onward. I'd like to address that issue before we actually stop broadcasting. We're still on now, and there's nothing scheduled beyond this point, so we can go ahead and continue. Would you two like to chime in on that particular issue?
On which part?
That women tend to want to change men to be what they would prefer instead of accepting men for their own individuality.
Total. Sorry. Go ahead.
No,
it's a total unacceptance of men. Because it's women wanting men to be women. It's not women receiving men as men. It's not women receiving men as men are unique from women and women are unique from men. No, it's women who are saying, oh, well, these men don't act the way I would act as a woman, and therefore it's unacceptable. One of the biggest things is how men and women process things. Sometimes men don't process things emotionally how women do. Oh, I mean, they do, but I mean, there is often through action. They'll move through grief or et cetera, or sometimes they'll take, go into their thoughts and take a little space. Some women can't handle the thought of men needing their own space. It freaks them out, and so they make it wrong. They make wrong how men process. And of course, each man is an individual, so every man processes things differently. But when men are not processing things the way women do, then all of a sudden, there's something wrong with men. No, there's nothing wrong with men. Men are men, and women are women. And they're completely different. There are similarities here and there, and there are exceptions, of course. But women who tend to not receive men as men, they look at men as broken women. And so they think men need to be fixed so they can be like women. It's very warped.
Kristal, pardon me. Hannah, your thoughts?
No, I totally have to agree with that as well. And it's such a pervasive thing that it's even part of female pop culture. Like, you buy any magazine where young adult women are the target audience or teenage girls are the target audience, and there will be at least one article in it on how to change your male significant other to suit you. Make him dress the way you want him to dress. Make him act the way you want him to act. It's such an accepted attitude.
Creepy.
It is creepy.
On this particular issue, I recently went into a very long discussion. There is a book written by a woman named Sherry Walker, I believe her name is, something like that. She wrote a book, How to Castrate Your Man in 7 Steps. 7 easy steps.
That sounds evil. She didn't mean literally. She meant figuratively. She meant make him not independent.
Psychologically.
That is creepy.
The book is laden from her holding up a giant pair of scissors on the cover, and then throughout the entire book, she has all these little quips and jokes about castration, because that's such a topic that so many women find absolutely hysterical, of course. But she goes into all these details about the quote-unquote the stereotypical manipulative behavior that toxic women tend to use in relationships in order to break men down and basically systematically instill Stockholm syndrome, so that they do whatever she wants, they think whatever she wants them to think, they act however she wants them to act. And there at the end, I'm told, I wasn't able to get through the whole book because I was just enraged, I'm told she wrote this as examples of behavior that women should never do in a relationship. The problem is, this is the entire book. If I made a book, about bomb making and gave you extremely detailed information on the tips, how to connect your detonator, how to use fuses, how to use pressure switches, how to use mercury triggers, how to rewire a pager so that you could have button activation from anywhere on the planet just by calling that number. and gave me
Yeah.
detailed schematics to the whole thing. And then at the very end of the book, I said, oh, but this is something that you should never do.
Yeah, that would get taken off the market and replaced by a fake.
Right.
Just like the anarchist cookbook. But
Oh, God. What the hell?
you're
That is
describing what's
disgusting.
written there. That's a female predator training module.
Right?
It is. It absolutely is. There's also a book that I saw one time, and it's, I can't remember the exact title of the book. I'll have to look it up, and maybe we can have another hangout sometime specifically about that particular book, but it's Ways to Train Your Man Using Tips from Professional Dog Trainers.
Oh, my God.
Oh,
That
that's
is
not
a real
even a
book.
new idea.
Holy
No, it's
shit.
not.
I can't.
There was an article, and I cannot remember which one it was. It was probably not. It might have been Cosmo. It was one of the reasons that I just pretty much quit reading women's magazines when I was in college. I got fed up. If there weren't cookie recipes in them, you know. But and it was about training your man, and it was the same kind of, you know, dog training type techniques and everything, using vocalization and, you know, suggestive touching and reward systems and all kinds. It was like, I read that and I thought, what the hell, you know, all the men around me are not dogs.
Right, and there's a lot of women who think this is acceptable. I have seen this conversation. I have freaking seen this conversation. And they're like, oh, well, you just need to, and doing the same thing that this naked brainwasher is, manipulating men through their sexuality, through, you know, abusing their sexuality and manipulating them. Like, oh, well, if you want him to do this, then just stroke his cock while you're talking about it or whatever. And that's actually sexual abuse. That's sexual manipulation and abusive. And to use a man's sexuality against him, this is disgusting. What the hell is wrong with these people?
And
They're
as you
selfish.
said, it's pervasive.
Yeah,
It is
yeah, it is.
common. I was reading an
Solipsism, that's what's wrong with them.
Right. Right. And then, you know, the misconception, because they'll be like, oh, yeah, this is BDSM. No, it's not BDSM. BDSM is not that. You know, it's two people joining on the same level. You're face to face. There's the sub is giving their trust to the dom. The dom keeps the person safe. There is nothing done that's not done without consent or prior discussion. Or if it's the couple have known each other for years and they try something new, there's always a discussion. There's never manipulation. There's a difference between BDSM and manipulation. Like there's a difference between seduction and manipulation. These women are talking about, this is what I want you to do. I don't care if you like it or not, and I'm going to use your sexuality to make you do what I say. That's sexual abuse.
Yeah.
There was an article I read, and it was on a black woman's website, or it was a online magazine publication specifically for African Americans and particularly for African American women. And she spoke at length about the concept of this reward versus positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and it was about the way that women in marriage or relationships, that's extremely common, where when a man does something they like, they reward him with sex. When he does something they don't like, they withhold sex. And it's the basic principle. It is the basic principle of training an animal, training any domesticated animal. It is reward and punishment. It is positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement.
It's sexual abuse. The bottom line to me is that you're hurting someone and you're manipulating someone with their sexuality. That's sexual abuse. That's the way I see it. Like, to me, there's no gray area there. That's warped. It's sick, and it's abusive. And unfortunately, it's become as if that's an okay thing to do, and it's not.
It's the standard.
Right, and then people joke about, oh, that's marriage. No, that's not marriage. That's dysfunction and abuse, and that's not the same, nor should it ever be. And if people, who say that think that's marriage, well, God, no wonder there's so many freaking divorces.
Yeah, that's why marriages fall apart.
Oh, it's disgusting.
And that's why marriages fall apart, is because instead of being invested in each other's welfare, you've got one or both parties thinking that it is some sort of, push and shove competition. You do what I want, or I won't do what you want.
Right.
And more often than not, it's the woman who is all, what's in it for me? What's in it for me?
Right. Right. Exactly. Like I'm the gift here, and it completely invalidates the man in the relationship. It doesn't say, hey, you're my partner. It's not working from a partner thing. There's nothing healthy there going on, such as partnership. It's saying, I'm getting what I want. Like you said, what's in it for me? And no wonder so many people are like, well, screw this. That's not going to work for me. Bye.
Yeah, well, and if you go into a relationship like that with what's in it for me as your reason, as soon as there's less in it for you, as soon as it becomes hard, you're just ready to walk.
Right, and it ultimately backfires on the person who does that. Even if it takes another relationship for it to backfire, it does, because that's just not healthy, and it doesn't pull in healthy things.
Well, and it makes that attitude makes it impossible for a person to have a genuine loving connection with another person, which I can't imagine living without that for my whole life.
Right. Right. I mean, it's gotta make people sick at some point. Like
there's not enough money in the world.
Right. Right.
Well,
so
folks,
I don't know. This girl, she is. I mean, like you said, this is she's just one of the many out there. And whether they're openly making money on it like this or not, she's definitely a prototype. An exaggerated one, but definitely one.
I would stipulate that she is a hyphenated example of a microcosm within the greater macrocosm, that she is symptomatic of the exact same behavior that is so pervasive throughout society.
Right. Right, absolutely.
Hannah, any final thoughts? Because we are now like 20 minutes, or we're 12 minutes past when we were supposed to stop broadcasting, and we're trying to compensate for the fact that we were without Kristal for so long.
I'm glad Kristal came back.
That's me too. Oh
no. I'm starting to lose my voice, so I think that's going to be it.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and we will be having we will be having more discussions like this, interviewing honey badgers on their recent articles. This broadcast is called The Badger Cave. Stay tuned and visit the Honey Badger main website, and I will get that for you momentarily. That is honeybadgerbrigade.com. Once again, honeybadgerbrigade.com. You can stay tuned there. We have a new section at the bottom right-hand corner of the main page listed as Honey Badger Hangout, and you will find any new Badger Cave discussion and the article to which it is linked on our main website. That way you can stay tuned and you can listen to interviews with the actual honey badgers who wrote their own articles. That way you can see the mindset, you can discuss the topic in detail, and in the future we'll have things a little bit more rounded. Hopefully we won't have our main interviewer disconnect halfway through. I'm just teasing you,
for the computer.
So stay tuned in the future. We'll have more for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Crew, if you'd like to stick around, there's more discussion to be had. I know, Hannah, you need to go, but Kristal, if you'd like to.
I'm sorry, guys. I've got Niagara Falls going down the back of my throat right now.